Welcome to Health Talk, a second opinion. This is host Dr. Bill Kellis, and I have one of my favorite people today. I have Dr. Dean2, who is the forerunner, the beginner of a thing which was called nasal specific when I first heard it. And it's basically putting balloons in the nose to reset your teeth, your jaw, your cranial bones, your head. It's amazing the work that's done there. And you were part of our clinic for 2 years, so we watched it in action, and so we've known each other for about 30 years. So.
I think 30 years ago is when we did meet in Virginia.
Yeah,
Hot Springs, Virginia.
30 years, and so Dean joined us for a couple of years, and I got a chance to watch your work up close and personal, as they say.
Yes, and the work has transformed over the years. That was when I was first developing it.
Well, I think that's really the key, Dean. I've seen your work completely change from being very evasive to being almost non-evasive at all.
Right.
And yet your results seem to be getting better and better and better.
Much better.
How can you explain that? Explain that.
Well, there's two basic concepts that I am bringing to the cranial therapy world. And I've been talking about these for some of them for almost 40 years. The first is that when your head bones, the skull, when it's asymmetrical, how is it that you could do a symmetrical therapy and correct that?
All right, now, asymmetrical. You can explain the word so everybody knows it.
So asymmetrical means if you look at your face in the mirror and your eyes are different shapes and your cheekbones are at different heights, or if your mouth isn't level, or if your ears stick out different one side than the other, or if your head sits in a tilt when you're just standing there,
right.
These are all indications that your face bones, those head bones, are not positioned the same.
Now,
that's asymmetrical.
And if you want to see if that's true, take a mirror and put it at your nose and look at the face on one side double-sided, and look at the face on the other side double-sided, and you'll see those are two different people.
Yeah, oftentimes. And there's even joke software that'll do that for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, so basically now you figure out which side is off and what's off. I've seen you check each sinus and everything. It makes a huge difference how you're doing it.
Right. Well, you see, part of the work that's so crucial when you're correcting asymmetry is not just the bones that you can touch on the outside of the head with your hands.
Yes.
You can't touch everything because there's bones that are deep, well inside your head. And so the way that I access those areas is to use a small balloon that I go from the nostril into the throat, and I inflate that balloon for a second or two, and it builds up pressure, and it cracks the joints in your head instead of in your hands, like I just popped with my knuckles there. See?
Now, I think people ought to know that your cranial bones, in between it, there's plates, and if one side of your cranial gets off, the other plate can stop your nerves, your vessels, all your flow, your fluid flow, your spinal fluid, all the things, and that can cause disease of like AAS and all kinds of stuff.
Well, so the first idea is that your head bones interlock. So you can't have one bone in your head out of position without all of them being affected.
Right.
And then your nervous system runs on fluids. So they're hydraulic devices, brains. So,
which is why when you breathe, it makes a difference.
That's
Somebody
right,
gets a blocked
your head pumps.
Sure, a blocked diaphragm and a blocked chewing mechanism and dental work and all that kind of stuff can screw the pumping mechanism.
Absolutely. And so because it's hydraulic, the shape of the vessel, according to hydraulic rules, the shape of the vessel determines where the fluids can flow. So when your head is asymmetrical and it's crooked, then your brain can't be perfused with blood and cerebrospinal fluid perfectly.
Right.
And that's going to alter your nervous system balance and your nervous system controls. So we will see people stutter because they have damage up in the upper left side. We'll see people with balance problems and they have difficulty walking. People with blood pressure problems, chronic headaches, double vision, jaw problems. All of those can be created from the asymmetry.
Right.
It's really annoying.
Right. Well, and some people fell on the back of their head and now their balance is off.
Right.
Because
their vestibular apparatus in their ears is out of position, and then their brainstem itself, the cerebellum and the other brainstem, they can lose proper control because they're being pinched.
Right.
It's all about the hydraulics and the positioning. It's a crucial thing, and it's often ignored.
And I think to our great detriment, A chiropractor can adjust all the bones. I've seen you can adjust any bone you want in the body.
Absolutely. But it doesn't work very well.
It doesn't hold because the inside the head we're off, or our dental work is off. Yeah,
so what I found is that the reason it doesn't hold is because the stability of the body in a gravity field doesn't improve.
Right.
Yeah, and that creates all the things you're talking about. So what we can do after our treatments is make sure the person's more stable, and we actually push on them, and you can feel the difference. The person will say, I feel like I'm rooted to the ground.
You sound like Lowell Ward now.
Yeah, and that's who I learned it from.
Yeah, no, that's who I learned it from.
Right. We both learned it from a guy that started
my
a technique called spinal stressology,
Yes.
and he was in the 80s, and it was a big inspiration for me. But I took it further, and that freaked him out, and he stopped speaking to me.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Lowell had it set to what he had it set to. I took it further also, and Lowell was my patient.
Right. I remember you treated him for his heart problems and stuff,
Yes.
and then he ignored you and died.
No. Well, he actually, I worked with him for about a year at his facility while I was building my San Diego facility.
Right. That was in the 80s, though.
Right.
Yeah.
He and I all did that thing back in Virginia.
That was 92. Yeah.
92.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that, I saw, you and I build off not only our own bricks and mortar, but bricks other people bring to the table, and then we go, oh, if that's true, then what about this?
Of course. That's what we're all supposed to be doing.
As I say, it's not science if the scaffolding's removed from the building. We're always changing and growing and getting better.
I hope so.
And now, tell me some of the things you've learned, because you do it markedly different from when I first met you.
So the body work now, we focus on not only just the bone alignment. What we're finding is hugely impacting people are the chronic adhesions and scars, and even the chronic tendinitis and things that they have. So
like fascia release almost.
Yeah, and so I have been doing periosteal releases, which I've never read about.
Talk about that, because most people don't know what periosteal means.
Right. So the coating on your bone, to prevent it from growing huge,
Right.
it's kind of like a sheath. It's like wallpaper
Right.
attached to the edge of your bone, and that's called your periosteum.
Right.
So it's around the bone, around
Right.
it, osteum, the bone. And the periosteum is what your ligaments and especially your tendons attach to. So when you have a severe sprain or strain, it actually pulls the periosteum off the bone a little bit. And if it doesn't heal smooth like perfect wallpaper,
Right.
and it's lumpy, it sends aberrant signals and the body doesn't work right.
Right.
And so I've been going in on people and working on that periosteum. You have to go in very deeply, and it's scarred and adhered. And I learned how, with my mind, to melt scar with my hands.
You just put your hand on it, and then you just
When you think the
focus
right
on
thought,
it. Right.
you can do it too. I'm not saying
No, it's a
me.
focus thing.
Right. So we go in, and right on the periosteum, we go along and we push deeply and realign all that skin that's like wallpaper, deep.
So you're
and
doing
then it resets.
You're doing an advanced case of Ida Rolf there.
Yes, it's one
Where
generation
she just does,
past
she
what
does
she
the
did.
physical part. You're doing the physical and the mental together, and that focus makes a difference.
Yeah, it's so effective. It's amazing. It changes people's lives I've had people after 30 or 40 years of pain after injuries become normal again. And whole changes in their brains and things, because they didn't realize how much the chronic pain and malfunctioning had affected their whole way that they operated.
Right.
It's been wonderful.
All right.
It's slow and tedious, though.
Well, anything like that, if it goes fast, is going to hurt, and if it goes
Yeah.
slow, it releases it a bit at a time until it stays.
That's right. And
You're changing a pattern, in other words.
That's right. And we have to change at the rate that the body doesn't freak out and go into shock.
Yes.
Right? And that's what we were talking about.
Because then it gets cramped up and twitched and crazy.
It
But
does.
body does have. I always look at the meningeal system going around the brain down the spinal cord
And
as a boa constrictor.
Yes. And the meninges, the longest fibers go from your head all the way to your coccyx.
Right.
And you remember another thing that Lowell Ward was working on is he was working on the coccyx and sacrum.
Yes.
And he was very rough, and he really hurt some people that way.
But he also helps some people.
He helps people a lot sometimes, and I have developed better techniques to work with the coccyx.
Yes.
And oh my,
Now,
it changes the shape of your face
Now
if
let's
your
talk
coccyx
about.
is out of position.
Of course, let's talk about the coccyx, because a lot of people, especially on the East Coast where there's ice and they ice skate and all that, fall on their tailbone.
Yes.
So do
All
gymnasts. So do cheerleaders thrown up in the air. Football players, you name it, hockey.
And after your tailbone's out of position, who's fixing it?
See,
Nobody's fixing it.
It's not just out of position, it's tipped forward, a tipped coccyx forward.
Oh, yeah.
That flattens out your low back and later on can become lower lumbar problems, and you can start losing your bones and your discs and everything.
And it also...
And sciatica.
Yes, and it pulls on your brain because those fibers go up around your brain. It tries to pull your brain through the big hole at the bottom of your skull, so people will have a lot of brain stem problems from their coccyx being way out of place because the untreated falls on the ice.
Tightness in their head. Now, they can call that ankylosing spondylitis. There's a lot of names for that. And I know because they've said that to me. But
Right.
ankylosing spondylitis essentially is that frozen neck, spine,
Yeah, it's that whole
hips,
fusion, that tendency towards fusion.
the meningeal locking up, essentially, the boa constrictor. Now, you undo the boa constrictor a couple ways. One of them you do at the top. I call it heads or tails. You go and you release the head, which is the sinuses and things like that. How do you do that? Let's walk it through so people can see it, and I'll let you do it on me so they can see how it looks.
Sure. So the first thing is that when we start working with people, we'll start working on their whole body, including their head.
Right.
Just and so, but when I start working on it, at first we just want them to kind of relax and to even out their musculature.
Right.
Then, as I start working with their head, I will start manipulating the skull bones.
Right.
And what I'll be looking at is whether the ears are aligned in parallel, the position of the cheekbones, the position of the forehead, the position of the bones in the back. If we look at those and imagine that there's supposed to be some kind of a spatial cube of some sort, then I start correcting that to make it more and more symmetrical. And once we do that and we release the muscles in the legs and pelvis and so forth, then we're getting to the point at the end of the treatment where we want to finish it with a balloon movement of the skull, because we need to move that sphenoid bone and the central bone in the head. It's here,
Right.
and it's behind your eyes, behind your nose, and little projections that come up that are called the pterygoid processes. I can touch right here and here. So there's two of those. And so when we put a balloon through the nostril into the throat, we push on different parts of that bone that's shaped like a butterfly or a bat. And we can release the joints just like we can crack joints in our hands. And when we do that, the connective tissue inside the skull that's outside the brain, the meninges and these other tissues, have a spring-like tension, and we can release them, and then the head starts shifting on its own.
And that's one of the things that Low Ward did.
Yes, he
with
did
his work. But
Yes.
as you say, his work was almost brutal compared to what you're doing.
Well, I know people that he actually injured long-term because he did the coccygeal work wrong.
Right.
So, but I also know people that he helped. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, remember, not that he's around anymore, but Bill Timmons was helped out of a wheelchair by his techniques.
Well, Bill and I, Bill and yes, we all go back 1,000 years.
Right.
Now, let's go into this. So you go to the tailbone, the muscles first, the
Yes.
bones. All right, tell about that.
So when I go, I'll go in with my index finger gloved, and I'll go up as far as I can. And I will, in through the rectum, I'll feel their sacrum and then the coccyx. And it should be a nice, smooth alignment. And if I run my finger down there, the whole thing should be smooth.
Right.
Now, when they were teaching us Beamer technique to work on the coccyx, we would just hold the end and have them kick their legs.
Yes, that
didn't do anything.
Well, the
for me.
way Ward did it was he'd have you he'd put stress on your head,
Yeah.
stress on the coccyx, and then you'd move your leg, and he'd do it in different positions: head back, head side, head
Yeah,
forward.
so it doesn't work very well. Difficult. So
But
what I
when it
found out-
explodes, it explodes.
Yeah, but what I found out instead was that we can just directly move it with our fingers. So when I come along someone's sacrum and coccyx, there's 10 bones in there. And
Right.
there's supposed to be in a nice stack, like a perfect
Right.
stack of blocks.
Right.
Instead, you'll find them all the way out of place, like cubes of, like a stack of dice. And
Now,
some
is
of them
that out of place
position.
because the meningle's tightening up, or is it because they fell?
Yes.
Doesn't matter.
I don't know. And I don't have to know.
You just know you have to fix it.
I go in there and I start smoothing it out, getting rid of those contractures, and they start feeling slack up in their head as soon as I start releasing that. Before I even get out of their rectum with my finger, they feel. I've had people say, "What are you doing? My face is moving." And I've got my finger up their rear, and they suddenly realize that what I'm telling them anatomically is true.
Right. Well, we both.
Because it sounds weird.
No, but that's the meningeal system.
Yes.
The only time that people ever hear about the meningeal system is spinal meningitis.
Right.
And when you get spinal meningitis, your neck locks and your whole back locks and your tailbone locks. Well,
Yep.
that's essentially what ankylosing spondylitis is. That's essentially what many of the disease states are. And many people who have migraine headaches and these kind of things are all attached to what you're talking about.
Yep, and so we see them for all of those things, and tied with lifestyle modification.
Well, parasites, allergy
Yes.
foods, all these things can set up chemicals, heavy metals, structural alignment, car accidents. All these things can trigger the meningeal system to lock up. The question is, how do you untrigger until your work? Nobody really had that conquered.
I bet you all of your listeners are thinking the same kinds of things. That's why they're listening, right?
Right.
Because it's wonderful, the amazing changes that you can do when you get rid of the yeast, the parasites, the worms, the metals, the fungus, the mold. And then you start getting
Mold's
rid
a
of the
huge
chemicals,
one on that.
especially in these humid places.
Yeah, mold and Lyme, that combination just locks the meningeal.
Yep.
And then people start getting disease like ALS and that kind of stuff, and when in fact it could be a mold Lyme situation.
And so we approach all of those conditions the same way. The lifestyle modifications, the structural stuff, and then we use radionic homeopathic type treatments to treat the vaccine injuries and other stuff like that. And then protect the housing. Did you know that there's wonderful things we can do for electromagnetic fields in a house, for
Right.
instance? So I'm carrying all the time.
You're neutralizing.
Yeah, I've got a device in my pocket here called a Grander device.
Yeah.
And there was a guy 60 or 70 years ago in Austria named Johannes Grander, and he figured out how to make ultimate pure water. And the water is so pure and energized that it's inside this metal tube, and it broadcasts a signal to nearby water molecules, and they convert. And this makes the EMFs non-toxic. It neutralizes microwave toxins. It neutralizes
Everything in your body, because your body's basic transport system is water.
That's right, and the water molecules start repairing just by having this near. So if I hand this to you and you hold it, your water molecules start being corrected.
Now, does that...
And you can do it for your whole house. And then all your water pipes for a 10-foot circle broadcast EMF neutralization. It's an amazing therapy. And that's the way we can infuse water that will last to do the radionic treatments, because tap water will only hold that energy for a few minutes.
Now, it's interesting.
But when we Grander treat the water, then it lasts.
You use the word radionic. Let me explain to the listeners. In quantum mechanics, there's a thing called entangled particles. That means if I have two particles, they go together, they match, they line up like what you're talking about. Then I take one and put it in Siberia, and the other one put it in Mexico. I move the one in Mexico, the one in Siberia moves automatically.
Right.
I move the one in Siberia, the one in Mexico moves automatically. Why? Because they're paired particles.
Yeah, and so the idea with radionics is that the devices that we use, they're essentially amplifiers for thought forms.
Right.
And the reality is that that everything can be done in radionics. It's limited only by your thoughts. That's the hardest thing.
Well, that sounds like something Jesus would say, like, if you want to move the mountain, just move the mountain.
Yeah. So
and you will do greater works than I do.
So it's in a multi-dimensional universe that's a little different from ours because distance doesn't exist for radionics.
Right.
So whether the thing you're treating is right next to the machine and holding onto a wire, or whether we have a picture or blood sample or something of what we're wanting to treat, it can be anywhere in the world, and we can analyze and treat it instantly from wherever we have our machine.
All right, now let's go into that just a little bit. It's more like a relationship of love. If I love somebody and they're in Siberia, I still love them.
Right?
It doesn't change if they love me. And
Right.
so,
And sometimes, if they have really strong feelings, you'll know,
yes,
right? And that knowing is because you're in this other dimension. You're not in the 3D world anymore. You felt their thought and you felt their feelings, or you might feel them feeling pain. This is the same kind of universe that the radionics machines work on. They're not the same as herbs and minerals, you know.
all
They're
right,
not
now,
the same.
all right, let's talk about that for a second, because when my mom died, when she died brain dead and they pulled the plug, when they pulled the plug, I was walking with my dad in the hallway, and all of a sudden he stops and grabs his chest. You know, in the Bible it says two become one, and that's got to be very serious because he felt that.
Right.
When Lori died, I knew she died. My wife.
Yeah, of course.
And I sat there and said, my gosh, there's something going on more than just the here and now. It's the now and then.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'll tell you what, where do you want to start now? Let's set up a treatment plan.
Any way you'd like to do it? You want to do a treatment?
We'll do a treatment.
Sure.
We'll do the part they can see.
Okay.
And then we'll do the other part.
That sounds good.
Or do you want to do the other part first?
Which other part did you mean?
Heads and tails.
Oh, well, we would do the coccyx first, and then your head if you wanted to do it that way.
All right, then I'll tell you what, we'll put it on a hold. We'll do the coccyx thing.
Mm-hmm.
Then we'll come back and do the head thing.
Sounds good.
Then I'll be your testimony here.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I'll edit that out. Don't worry.
I think the coccygeal should always be done first. Because it affects the
Give me your
liver.
hand. Give me your hand.
Thank you.
Even though there's more air out here, just step out. It'll cool
Well, it's
off.
not only that, it's hard to fit everything you want to say in the time.